Cowboy turned down every woman, until a white stranger asked, "You want a wife, or just shelter?" The sun burned low over Red Butte, bathing the dusty Wyoming town in a coppery glow. Windmill blades creaked lazily, horses snorted in their stalls, and the evening breeze carried the scent of dry sage. Folks were winding down, heading toward supper or the saloon. Everyone except Caleb Thorne. He stood beside his mare in front of the general store, tightening the saddle strap with slow, practiced motions. He worked like a man who didn't need to hurry, a man who'd learned to conserve energy, because grief had already drained him once. Caleb was tall, too tall for most hats, and quiet in that way that people mistook for coldness. Broad shoulders, coal dark hair, eyes that rarely gave away a single thought. A man like that drew attention from women naturally. But Caleb drew a line around himself so clear that even the bravest heart in town didn't cross it twice. Inside the store, Mrs. Dugan whispered to her sister. He turned down Lucy again. Wouldn't even walk her to the buggy. "Bless that girl," her sister sighed. "She's prettier than spring water." "Doesn't matter," Mrs. Dugan muttered. "No woman gets through to him." Out on the street, Sheriff Briggs strolled over, leaning both elbows on the hitching post, watching Caleb work. "You keep refusin' every lady in Red Butte," Briggs drawled. "Pretty soon folks'll think you done swore some kind of vow." Caleb checked the saddle one more time. "Ain't making vows. Ain't lookin' either." "That's the same thing," Briggs said, pushing his hat back. Caleb didn't answer. Instead, he tightened the reins and mounted his horse. He never explained himself to anyone, not even the sheriff who'd known him since he was knee-high. Briggs didn't know about the small wooden ring Caleb kept hidden in a drawer at home. Didn't know about the winter night when the mountains swallowed the woman Caleb loved. The world might have thought Caleb Thorne cold. But he was really just a man who refused to bury another love. The horse shifted beneath him. He tipped his hat. "Evenin', Sheriff." Briggs sighed. "One of these days, Caleb, something in this town's gonna surprise you." "Doubt it." Caleb nudged his horse forward. And then he stopped. Because across the road, in the fading light, someone new stood at the edge of town. A woman. A stranger. He blinked once, but she didn't disappear. Tall, willowy, carrying a battered trunk that looked far heavier than she did. Her coat was travel-worn, torn at one elbow, and dust clung to the hem of her skirt like she'd walked 100 miles. The woman swept a hand across her brow, pushing back wind-tangled hair, the color of fresh wheat under winter light, and her skin was pale from travel, not softness. Even from a distance, Caleb saw the exhaustion in her posture. And the stubbornness beneath it. Her lips were split. Her cheek bore a fading bruise. And she looked at the town like she wasn't sure she'd be welcomed. But she'd stand her ground anyway. Something inside Caleb went unnervingly still. Briggs followed his gaze. "Don't know her. Must have come off the stagecoach earlier." Caleb didn't respond. The woman lifted her trunk, stumbled under its weight, but reset her grip with a quiet, determined breath. Then she looked up. And her eyes met Caleb Thorne's. Time didn't slow. It stopped. Her gaze held no flirtation. No fear. Just a strange, measuring calm, like she'd spotted something in him she recognized. Then she spoke, her voice low, tired, but steady. "You look like the man folks pointed me to." Caleb straightened in the saddle, caught off guard. "Pointed you to? For what?" "To ask for directions," she said simply. "Name's Rowena Hale." Caleb didn't know it yet. But his quiet life, the one he'd protected for years, had already shifted. Because he wasn't looking for a woman. But this one had clearly been looking for him. Rowena Hale stood in the middle of Red Butte like she didn't belong to any place on earth. Not the dusty town. Not the road behind her. And definitely not the future ahead. A woman alone was rare enough out here. A woman alone with bruises. That was something else entirely. Caleb dismounted slowly, boots hitting the dirt with a soft thud. He kept a respectful distance. Half out of politeness. Half because something about her unsettled him in a way he couldn't name. "You lost, miss?" he asked quietly. Rowena shook her head. "Not lost. Just between places." Her trunk wobbled as she set it down. She wiped her brow, breath shallow as if she hadn't eaten properly for days. Caleb studied her a moment. She was pale, not with fragility, but with someone who'd traveled through too much weather and too many troubles. Her eyes, they were the kind of eyes that had seen more than they should have. But they were also clear. Direct. She didn't look down or away. "Far from home?" he asked. Rowena hesitated. Then, "Far enough that going back isn't an option." A small crowd had begun to gather, Red Butte folk curious by nature. Mothers clutched their children's shoulders. A pair of cowhands muttered, wondering who she ran from. The scrutiny didn't rattle her. She lifted her chin a little higher. Sheriff Briggs was the first to step forward, his voice gentle but protective. "Miss Hale, travelin' alone ain't safe. You got people expecting you somewhere? Family? Husband?" "No family." No flicker of hesitation. "And no husband." Briggs frowned slightly. "Well, you need a place to stay. There's a boarding house." "I don't take charity," she cut in, her voice steady but not rude. "I work. I earn. That's how I survive." Caleb felt something in his chest tighten. Plenty came through Red Butte with tears and begging. But this woman refused pity. Refused softness. Briggs nodded toward Caleb. "Thorne here runs the biggest ranch for miles. Could use help if he's willin'. Rowena turned to Caleb fully then, and something changed in the air. "I can cook," she said quietly. "So, clean. Tend animals. Chop wood if I have to. Hard work doesn't scare me." Her voice carried absolute conviction. Caleb shifted his weight, taken off guard by how directly she spoke to him. He looked over her shoulders, saw the torn coat, the welt on her lip, the exhaustion holding her spine rigid. He rubbed his thumb across the edge of his belt buckle. "You know ranch work ain't for the faint-hearted." "I'm not faint-hearted," she murmured. And he believed her. Caleb opened his mouth to respond. Probably to decline. He always declined. He didn't bring anyone onto his land unless he knew them, and he didn't know her at all. But before he could speak, a gust of wind whipped her coat aside. Behind it, half hidden under fabric and shadow, was a dark, ugly bruise spanning her ribs. The kind that didn't come from accidents. The kind no woman should carry alone. Caleb's stomach dropped. Rowena immediately pulled the coat tight again as if ashamed. Briggs noticed too, eyes narrowing with concern. "You hurt, miss?" "No," she lied instantly. "I can stand. I can work." Caleb's voice softened without him meaning it to. "Who did that?" Rowena's eyes hardened. "That's my business." Caleb took a step nearer. "And if it becomes trouble here, it becomes mine." Her breath hitched. Something in her expression flickered. Fear, gratitude, anger, he couldn't tell which. "I told you," she said quietly, "I don't take charity." Caleb crossed his arms. "And I don't offer it." Their eyes locked. For a moment too long, too honest, too raw. She looked away first. Briggs cleared his throat. "Let's get you two under some shade. Talk this proper." Rowena nodded, and as she moved toward the trough, her legs trembled, but she refused help, even when the trunk nearly toppled her sideways. Caleb grabbed the handle before it fell. "Let me," he muttered. "I can carry it." "Didn't say you couldn't." Their fingers brushed, and she stiffened like he'd touched fire. Caleb almost pulled his hand back. Almost. Instead, he lifted the trunk effortlessly, carrying it to the shaded side of the mercantile. He turned to her. "You got grit. I'll give you that." Rowena looked up at him. Really looked. For the first time since she'd arrived. Something soft flickered in her eyes. Not trust. Not yet. But something like relief. "If you need someone who won't quit," she said, "I'm your woman." The phrase hung in the air between them. Not flirtation. Just truth. Just survival. Caleb swallowed hard. He'd turned down every woman in Red Butte for years. But this one? This one he couldn't dismiss so easily. The shade beside the mercantile was cool compared to the blazing street, but Rowena Hale didn't relax. She stood stiffly, shoulders squared as if soldiers might march up at any moment. Caleb Thorne set her trunk down gently, dust puffing around its corners. He wiped his palms on his jeans, unsure why his heartbeat felt heavier than work warranted. He'd never been unsettled by a stranger. But this woman wasn't simply new. She was carrying a story, raw, bruised, unfinished. And whether he liked it or not, she'd set it right in front of him. Caleb leaned against the trough, arms folding across his chest. "You said you're looking for work?" Rowena nodded. "Yet you won't say where you come from." "My past doesn't matter." "It always matters." Her jaw tightened. "It doesn't matter to you." Caleb lifted one eyebrow. "Doesn't it?" For the first time, something in Rowena faltered. Her eyes darted away toward the open plains beyond the town, toward a freedom that felt close but not close enough. She clasped her hands in front of her skirt, the knuckles white. "I just need a place to stay," she murmured. Caleb's tone gentled. "Everybody needs something. Shelter. Food. Safety. Maybe more." Rowena's breath hitched, barely, but he saw it. Sheriff Briggs lingered some distance away, pretending to check his watch but keeping an eye on them. Curious townsfolk drifted by slower than usual, pretending to mind their business. Rowena swallowed hard. "Caleb Thorne," she said finally, "if you're thinking of refusing, say it now. I can take a no, I've taken worse." Caleb studied her face. She wasn't pretty in the delicate way the town girls were. She was beautiful in a way forged by storms. A woman who stood even when shaking. A woman who refused pity even when drowning. He didn't know what to do with that. He cleared his throat. "You know ranch work ain't easy. Lot of men don't last." Rowena held his gaze. "I've done harder things." He didn't doubt that. Still, Caleb felt something inside him. An instinct, a weight of caution he always trusted, telling him there was more to her story. "You runnin' from someone?" he asked softly. Rowena froze. Her eyes snapped to his. "Why would you ask that?" "Because bruises don't make themselves." She flinched. "You don't know anything about me." "I'm trying to." Rowena looked down at her boots, a shadow crossing her features. Then she stepped closer. Too close. Her voice dropping to a low whisper only he could hear. "You want honesty, Caleb Thorne?" He blinked, startled. "Always." Rowena inhaled sharply, steadying herself. "I need a husband." Caleb stiffened. "What?" She lifted her chin, meeting his stare without flinching. "You heard me." His heartbeat pounded once, hard. A stranger, a woman he didn't know, didn't understand, was asking him something he'd avoided for years. She continued, voice even but trembling at the edges. "A woman alone can't go far in the West without men assuming she's available, vulnerable, claimable. A woman with a husband is safer." Caleb exhaled slowly. "That ain't a good enough reason to marry a stranger." "It's the reason women marry all the time," she said quietly. "For safety. For stability. For survival." He shook his head. "I'm not looking for a wife." Rowena nodded once, firm, composed. "So you want shelter," she said. "Someone to cook and clean and work without question." "I didn't say that either." She folded her arms now, mirroring him unintentionally. "Then what do you want, Caleb Thorne?" she asked softly. "You want a wife, or just shelter?" The question hit him like a blow. Caleb's throat worked. "Miss Hale?" "Rowena." "Rowena," he corrected softly. "You can't just walk into town and offer yourself to the first man who doesn't look dangerous." "I didn't pick the first man," she whispered. "I picked the one the townsfolk said was honest." Caleb blinked. "They said that?" Rowena nodded. "And that you don't bother women. And that you live alone." Caleb's jaw clenched. "That's not an argument toward marrying you." "It's enough reason to trust you," she murmured. Caleb looked away, suddenly unable to hold her gaze. Trust. He hadn't heard that word in years. Rowena straightened her shoulders, the tiny tremor returning to her hands. "If my question offended you," she said quietly, "forget I asked it." She stepped back, face unreadable. "I won't trouble you further. I'll walk on." She turned, grabbed the trunk, its weight dragging her down, and Caleb felt something rise inside him like a rope tightening around his heart. A woman hurt. A woman hungry. A woman desperate, yet too proud to beg. He'd seen strays on the ranch walk away like that. Back straight, eyes forward, hiding their limp. His voice came out rough, unplanned, heated with something he didn't understand. "Rowena." She stopped. "Don't walk off just yet." Slowly she turned back toward him. The wind lifted a lock of her golden hair. Her eyes, tired, hopeful, afraid, met his again. This time, Caleb didn't look away. Rowena Hale lifted her trunk with both hands, though the weight dragged her shoulders down and made her breath catch sharply. Dust rose around her boots as she took the first step away from Red Butte's main road. She didn't look back. Not at Caleb. Not at the sheriff. Not at the people staring like she was a story unfolding right in the middle of their safe, small lives. Her spine was straight, chin lifted, but her legs trembled badly. Caleb Thorne watched her walk away, watched the stubborn bravery in every step, and something inside him twisted so hard he almost swore aloud. "Let her go," Sheriff Briggs murmured beside him. "She's tough. She'll find a place." Caleb didn't answer. Because the sheriff didn't see what he saw. He didn't see how Rowena's shoulders sagged when she thought no one noticed. He didn't see how she kept wiping her palms on her skirt, nerves she tried to hide. He didn't see how her mouth pressed tight after she refused help, as if she'd been punished for accepting kindness before. Caleb saw all of it. He always noticed quiet suffering. He'd lived with his own long enough. Rowena took another step, her knees nearly buckled. That was it. Caleb's boots hit the ground before he'd made a conscious decision. He strode after her, each step faster, angrier with himself, angrier with the world that put bruises on women and forced them to ask strangers for safety. "Rowena," he called. She didn't slow. "Stop." She froze, like someone who feared the word, not the man saying it. Slowly she turned, her eyes guarded, chin still high. Caleb reached her, breathing hard in a way that had nothing to do with the short walk. "You can't just walk out alone," he said. "I told you, I don't want to trouble you," she replied, voice thin but steady. "Trouble me?" His voice rose. "You weigh less than that trunk and you're trying to carry both across the countryside. That's a fool's plan." Her jaw trembled. "It's the only plan I have." "No," Caleb said sharply. "It ain't." He took the trunk right out of her grip. Not roughly but firmly, decisively. She exhaled a small gasp, almost losing her balance as the weight disappeared. "Where are you taking that?" she demanded. He set the trunk down between them. "Where do you think?" Rowena blinked, confused. "You said you weren't ready for marriage." "I ain't." "You said you don't take in strays." "I don't." "Then what are you doing?" she whispered. Caleb's voice softened, not gentle, not tender, but fierce in a quiet way that made her breathe unevenly. "I'm not letting you walk into danger." "That's what." Rowena looked down. She didn't cry. But the relief in her eyes was heartbreaking. Sheriff Briggs approached slowly, hands on his belt. "Caleb, you taking her in?" It wasn't a judgment. It was disbelief. Caleb Thorne, who turned down pies, dances, prayers, proposals, and every woman who ever tried to get near him, was standing beside a stranger's trunk like he'd already decided she belonged on his land. Rowena lifted her chin. "Just shelter," she said quickly, almost defensively. "I don't expect more." Caleb met her eyes, the evening sun catching the gold in her hair. "You asked me a question," he said quietly. "About wantin' a wife." Rowena's breath caught, her face flushing with embarrassment. "I shouldn't have said that." "You shouldn't be been desperate enough to need to," Caleb replied. For a moment neither spoke. Then Caleb bent, picked up her trunk, and hefted it onto his shoulder like it weighed nothing. Rowena stared. He didn't just carry the trunk, he claimed responsibility for it. "Come on," he said gently. "You're staying at my ranch." Rowena blinked, stunned. "Caleb, I'm giving you shelter," he said firmly. "Not marriage. Not promises. But a roof, a bed, safety." She swallowed hard. "And work." "There'll be work," he answered. "Plenty of it. Enough for a woman with grit." A tremor passed through her, not fear but something like hope. Small and fragile. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You ain't a burden. And you ain't a stray. You're a woman who needs help." His eyes softened. "And I'm a man who can give it." Rowena pressed her lips together so tightly they turned white. "Thank you," she whispered. Not meek. Not timid. Just sincere, too sincere. Caleb nodded once. As he guided her toward the wagon, every pair of eyes in town watched. And the muttering began. "Caleb Thorne? Helping a woman? He won't even let folks bring him pie. She must have done something to him." Lord have mercy, the cowboy said yes to somebody. But Caleb didn't hear them. He only saw Rowena Hale, walking beside him with shaky steps and a dignity that broke his chest open. Briggs watched from the post, shaking his head. "Well," he murmured to himself, "if this ain't the day Red Butte turns upside down." Because Caleb Thorne, the man who had locked his heart behind a wall of grief, had just made a choice that would change everything. The storm outside raged, but the storm between them was quieter, more dangerous. The cabin smelled of pine sap and warming bread as the fire crackled. Marin sat at the small wooden table, the steam rising from her cup of peppermint tea making soft curls in the air. Her face was unusually still, like someone who had made peace with expecting nothing. Cole noticed it immediately. He always noticed her. He leaned a shoulder on the doorframe, arms crossed over his broad chest, still smelling faintly of rain and horse. "You're quiet," he said, voice low. Marin's fingers tightened around the cup. "Just tired," she murmured. But Cole recognized the lie. She had to tell. Her lashes fluttered twice when she wasn't being honest. He moved closer, slow, like approaching a wild creature that might bolt. "What are you really thinking?" She inhaled, exhaled, and finally looked up. "Why me?" she asked. Cole's heartbeat stumbled. "What?" Marin swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you take me in? You turned down every woman in this town. Every offer. Every girl who tried to catch your attention. Yet you let me stay. She shook her head as if confused by her own presence. I'm a stranger. A foreigner. And not exactly someone a cowboy like you would want. Cole blinked, stunned. Who told you that? No one had to, she whispered. People look. They whisper. And I know what I am, she hesitated. Different. He wasn't a man easily angered, but something hot and protective flared up inside him. Marin, he said, stepping toward her. You listen to me. Her gaze darted up, startled by the intensity in his tone. He sat across from her slowly, as if laying down a burden he'd carried too long. I didn't turn down those women because they weren't good. I turned them down because I didn't feel anything. Not a spark. Not a pull. Just nothing. His fingers flexed on the table, knuckles tense. Until you walked into my barn half frozen, calling me, sir, like you weren't shivering to death. She looked down again. He reached out, carefully, and touched her hand. Just his fingertips. A brush of warmth. She didn't pull away. You make me feel things, Marin. Things I ain't felt in a long damn time. Maybe ever. Her breath caught. It ain't about you being different, he continued. It's about you being, you. Marin's voice trembled. What if you regret letting me stay? What if I become a burden? Cole leaned closer, the firelight catching the determined line of his jaw. You being here ain't a burden. It's the first time this place has felt alive in years. She blinked, stunned. And besides, he added, a soft, teasing rumble in his tone, if anyone ought to be worried, it's me. Why? She asked, baffled. Because I'm the one getting attached. Her breath stopped. Completely. Cole stood abruptly, suddenly restless. Sorry? Didn't mean to say all that out loud. But before he could step away, Marin rose from her chair. The fire snapped behind her. I'm glad you did, she whispered. For a moment, just a heartbeat, their faces were inches apart. Close enough to feel each other's breath. Close enough to tempt fate. But neither moved. Cole swallowed thickly and stepped back before the moment pulled him in too deep. You should sleep, he murmured. Marin nodded, but her cheeks held a soft warmth that hadn't been there before. As she walked to her room, Cole stood alone by the fire, rubbing the back of his neck and muttering to himself. Lord help me. I'm fallen for that woman. The town had opinions. Too many of them. And one woman was about to test Cole's patience, and Marin's courage. The next morning the storm had passed, leaving the world crisp and washed clean. Marin rode with Cole into town for supplies, bundled in one of his coats that nearly swallowed her whole. The sun lit her hair like winter honey, and Cole tried not to stare too long. Failed every time. When they arrived at the general store, conversation inside dipped to a hush. Marin felt the eyes first, sharp, assessing, lingering. The kind that made the back of her neck prickle. Cole noticed her stiffen and instantly moved a half-step closer, his presence shielding without smothering. Inside, customers pretended to browse, but their ears pointed right at the newcomers. Mrs. Hendricks, the storekeeper's wife, plastered on a too-sweet smile as she approached. Well, Cole, I see you've brought company. Her eyes skimmed Marin from head to toe, not hiding her disapproval. Cole's jaw flexed once. I did. Marin kept her gaze down as she traced the wooden counter, wishing she could disappear into it. Mrs. Hendricks clicked her tongue. You know, Cole, folks have been wondering about you talking in a stranger. A foreigner. All alone at your ranch. Her voice dipped, conspiratorial. Not proper. Not safe. Marin's heart thudded painfully. Shame. Fear. Old memories rising like ghosts. Before she could speak, Cole stepped forward, voice calm but dangerous. She's under my roof, he said. That makes her under my protection. A few people stiffened. Others looked away. Mrs. Hendricks recovered with a brittle smile. Well, if you say so, but some of us think a man like you ought to be looking for a wife, not a winter charity case. Marin flinched. A quiet fell. Cole turned his head slowly, his expression turning dark as thunder. That so? He asked softly. But another voice broke in before he could tear into the woman. "'Scuse me," drawled a familiar and unwelcome tone. Caleb Stroud. Tall, slick, and trouble-wrapped in a fancy coat. He stepped forward, smirk pulling at his lips as he looked Marin over in a way that made her stomach twist. "Didn't know you had a guest, Cole," he said. "Pretty little thing, too." He tipped his hat. "Mississippi." Marin nodded stiffly. Caleb's eyes slid back to Cole. "You always were picky. Passed up every girl for miles. But I suppose bringing in an outsider is one way to get yourself a woman." Cole's body went still. Not a muscle moved. Watch it, he said quietly. Caleb shrugged, grin darkening. Just saying. If she ever decides she wants better company, my door's open. He winked at Marin. Cole stepped forward so fast the room sucked in a breath. Caleb jolted back, bumping into a stack of grain sacks. Say something like that again, Cole warned, voice low and cold, and you won't walk out of here with your teeth. Caleb swallowed, tried to laugh it off, and backed away. Marin's hands trembled as she gathered a jar of herbs from the counter, but Cole gently touched her elbow. You okay? He murmured. She nodded. I'm used to it. Cole frowned. Well, I ain't. Not when it comes to you. Her breath hitched. They finished their supplies quickly, but as Cole paid, Mrs. Hendricks couldn't resist one last jab. You know, dear, she said to Marin, men like Cole are only kind for a while. Once the snow melts, you'll be on your way again. Women like us stay. Women like you pass through. Something inside Marin crumbled. But something else began to burn. She lifted her chin, not high but steady. Maybe so, she said softly. But sometimes it is the stranger who teaches a place what kindness actually looks like. Gasps rolled through the room. Mrs. Hendricks' smile faltered. Cole's eyes warmed, pride flickering through them. Outside, once they reached the horses, Cole rested his hand on Marin's waist as he helped her mount. His touch lingered, gentle, deliberate. I didn't like what they said, she whispered. I didn't either. I don't want to bring trouble to you. Trouble ain't the problem, Cole said. Losing you would be. Her breath stilled. He swung into the saddle beside her. Let's get home. As they rode away, Marin glanced back at the little town, and realized this place might never accept her. But Cole did. And somehow, that felt like enough. For now. Night fell quiet, but the danger wasn't over. Neither was the truth. The ride back to the ranch was silent, the kind of silence thick with unspoken words. Cole glanced at Marin every few minutes, noticing the way she hugged his coat tighter around her, how her gaze stayed lowered. What the townspeople said had cut her deep, deeper than she let on. By the time they reached the cabin, dusk had settled like a blanket. The sky glowed bruised purple, the first stars waking up. Cole helped her down from the saddle, hand steady on her waist. He didn't let go right away. You ain't trouble to me, he said quietly. I know. She said it softly, but not like she believed it. He opened his mouth to say more, then froze. The cabin door was open. Wide open. A lantern flickered inside. Cole instantly pushed Marin behind him. Stay close. His voice was sharp, commanding. Not the gentle version she'd come to know. They stepped inside. The room was a mess. Drawers open, blankets tossed, the chest beside the bed cracked apart. Someone had been searching for something. Marin's heartbeat slammed in her ears. Cole? He moved through the cabin silently, checking corners, checking shadows, checking every place a man could hide. When he returned, his expression was storm-dark. They're gone, he muttered. But whoever it was sure as hell wasn't a stranger. They knew where things were kept. Marin swallowed hard. Do you think it was Caleb? Cole didn't answer, because his silence said enough. He set the door back on its hinge and turned to her. You hurt anywhere? No. Scared? Yes. He nodded once. Then sit by the fire. I'm making sure no one comes back tonight. But as he moved toward the door, Marin grabbed his arm. Cole, stay. Please. He paused. Then slowly turned toward her, his face softening. She was trembling, not from cold but from everything that had happened. The stares. The whispers. The violation of this home she'd just begun to feel safe in. He walked her to the table, sat her down, and knelt in front of her. Literally lowered himself to her height. Marin, he said, his voice low and rough, I ain't ever had someone in this house worth protectin', not like you. But if you want me to stand guard all night, I will. If you want me sittin' right here holding your hand, I'll do that too. Her eyes shimmered. Why are you being so kind to me? His answer came without hesitation. Because somewhere along the way you stopped being a guest. Her breath caught. You became mine to worry about, he said softly, eyes searching hers. Mine to look after. Mine too. He stopped, jaw tightening with the weight of the words he hadn't meant to say out loud. Marin leaned closer, barely a whisper between them. To what, Cole? He swallowed hard. To what? The fire crackled. The wind outside sighed against the walls. Marin's heart pounded so loud she wondered if he could hear it. Cole? She lifted her hand and touched his cheek. Lightly. Hesitantly. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to be something people talk about. I want to be somewhere I'm wanted. You are? He said instantly, voice fierce. By me. Her eyes filled. I know I ain't said it right, he murmured, and I ain't asked it right, but if you stay here, truly stay, I'll make damn sure you never question that again. Marin's breath trembled. What are you asking? Cole took her hands in his, rough palms wrapping gently around her fingers. I'm a skin, he said slowly, if you want this place to be your home, with me. Her lips parted. Are you saying? I'm saying, he whispered, I want you here when the snow melts. Not as a stranger. Not as shelter. Not as someone passing through. He swallowed, eyes locked to hers. But as the woman I wake up to every damn morning. A tear slipped down her cheek. Cole wiped it with his thumb, tender as a man like him could be. Tell me to stay, she whispered, and I will. I ain't tellin', Cole said, leaning closer until her breath mingled with his. I'm a skin. Then my answer is yes. He closed his eyes, relief crashing through him like a storm breaking. When he opened them, the firelight danced in the blue of his gaze. He didn't kiss her. But he held her face gently, reverently, as though the moment itself was sacred. And for the first time since she arrived, Marin felt not like an outsider, but like she belonged. With him.